The lights were bright. The crowd was relaxed. Laughter filled the room like nothing unusual was about to happen. Muhammad Ali stepped onto the stage smiling, the way he always did, confident, calm, almost playful. Dean Martin stood just a few feet away, comfortable, in control. A man who had owned stages like this for years. Everyone expected jokes. Everyone expected charm. No one expected a challenge. Ali looked around the room for a moment. He took in the applause, the cheers, the cameras. Then his smile faded just slightly. It was so subtle most people missed it. But Dean didn't. Ali shifted his stance, not aggressive, not dramatic, just deliberate. The music softened, the laughter slowed. Something invisible changed in the air. Ali leaned forward and said a few words that weren't written anywhere. The audience laughed at first, because that's what they were supposed to do. But Ali didn't laugh with them. Dean Martin raised an eyebrow. Ali continued. His voice was calm, almost respectful. But there was something underneath it, a quiet challenge that didn't need shouting. A challenge delivered with a smile. People in the front rows stopped clapping. Some leaned forward. Others glanced at each other, unsure if this was part of the show. Dean's grin froze, just for a heartbeat. Ali wasn't insulting him. He wasn't mocking him. He wasn't even being rude. And that's what made it dangerous. Ali's words weren't meant to entertain. They were meant to test. The cameras kept rolling. A few seconds passed that felt much longer. Long enough for the audience to realize this wasn't a joke anymore. Long enough for Dean to understand exactly what was happening. Muhammad Ali, the most confident man in the world, had just challenged him. Not with fists, not with threats, but with presence, with timing, with absolute certainty. The room went quiet in a way that couldn't be planned. No producer stepped in, no cue cards appeared, no music saved the moment. It was just two legends standing under the lights, and only one of them had spoken. Dean Martin finally moved. He looked at Ali. He smiled again. But this time, the smile meant something different. Whatever he was about to say, whatever he was about to do, would decide whether this moment became awkward or unforgettable. And in that silence, everyone watching knew one thing for sure. They weren't just witnessing entertainment anymore. They were witnessing history. This wasn't a boxing ring. There were no ropes, no referee, no bell waiting to be rung. This was a stage built for comfort. Bright lights hung above polished floors. The audience sat close together, relaxed, dressed for a night of laughter and music. The kind of place where nothing serious was supposed to happen. Dean Martin had stood on stages like this his entire life. This was his world, his territory. He knew how to control a room with a glance, a pause, a joke delivered at exactly the right moment. People trusted him to guide the night, to make them laugh, to keep things easy. And for a while, everything was exactly that. The band was ready. The cameras were smooth and steady. Applause came on cue. Muhammad Ali stood under the lights, soaking it all in, not as a guest, not as a performer trying to impress, but as someone observing. Ali had been in louder places, more dangerous places, places where one wrong move could change a life forever. This room felt calm, almost too calm. He scanned the faces in the crowd, some smiling, some distracted, most completely unaware that anything unusual was happening. Dean spoke again, casually guiding the show forward. The audience followed him instinctively. But Ali didn't. He stayed quiet, still. Watching, it was subtle, but the contrast was there. Dean was moving, Ali was waiting. The laughter continued, but it no longer filled the space the same way. It bounced off the walls and faded quicker than before. A few people began to notice Ali's silence. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't uncomfortable. He was focused. The cameras lingered on him just a second longer than planned. Dean caught it. He had spent years reading rooms, reading people, reading moments before they arrived, and something about Ali's posture didn't match the setting. Ali wasn't leaning back, he wasn't playing along. He stood grounded, feet firm, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. This wasn't a man waiting for his turn to speak. This was a man deciding when. The power dynamic hadn't shifted loudly, it hadn't announced itself. It simply tilted. Dean adjusted his stance slightly, still smiling, still smooth, but now paying attention. The audience sensed it too, even if they couldn't explain it. The noise softened. The energy narrowed. It felt like watching two experienced chess players pause mid-game, both knowing the next move would matter. Ali finally moved his head, just slightly, as if aligning himself with the moment. No one told him to speak. No cue came from backstage. This wasn't part of the plan, and that's what made it powerful. The room was still public, still bright, still filled with people. but suddenly it felt private, like something important was about to be said, something not meant for laughs. Dean waited. Ali looked at him, and in that quiet space between them, the audience realized something unsettling. This stage no longer belonged to just one man, and whatever was coming next would change the tone of the entire night. Muhammad Ali finally spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the microphones to catch it. At first, it sounded playful the way Ali often was, a hint of humor, a familiar rhythm in his voice. The audience relaxed again, thinking the tension had passed. Dean Martin smiled wider, ready to volley back with a joke. But Ali didn't stop there. He took one slow step forward. The movement was small, but intentional. Ali wasn't trying to dominate the stage, he was narrowing the space. His words shifted subtly, but unmistakably. What began as light teasing turned into something sharper, not disrespectful, not rude, serious. Ali spoke about confidence, about presence, about what it meant to stand in front of people and own a moment. The audience laughed again, but this time the laughter came late, delayed, uncertain. Dean noticed. Ali wasn't attacking Dean Martin the entertainer. He was challenging Dean Martin the man. Still smiling, Ali tilted his head slightly, as if measuring the response. Then he said something that changed the temperature of the room. A simple line, delivered calmly, but it landed heavy. Not a punchline, a test. Some people clapped automatically, then stopped when they realized Ali wasn't joking. Dean's expression didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. Ali kept going. He spoke about courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that shows up without needing approval. He wasn't bragging. He wasn't boasting. For once, Muhammad Ali wasn't talking about being the greatest. He was asking a question without asking it out loud. Who really controls the moment? The audience felt it before they understood it. A few people leaned forward, others crossed their arms. The laughter had completely faded now. This wasn't uncomfortable. Not yet. But it was real. Dean chuckled softly, buying time. Ali noticed. He smiled again, not cocky, not mocking, respectful, but unmovable. And here's the thing most people didn't realize at the time. Ali wasn't trying to win. He was trying to see who Dean Martin really was when the script disappeared. This wasn't a boxing match. This wasn't an ego contest. It was something rarer, a moment where two legends met without protection. Ali paused. The silence stretched. Long enough for the cameras to cut to the crowd. Long enough for people at home to feel the shift through the screen. Then Ali added one more line. Not louder, not stronger, softer. And that's what made it dangerous. That line reframed everything, the challenge, the stage, the expectations. Dean stopped smiling for half a second. Just half. If you blinked, you missed it. But Ali didn't. He stepped back this time, giving the space back, as if to say, your turn. Before we go any further, if you enjoy real, unscripted moments like this, moments where legends drop the act and show who they really are, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Stories like this don't happen often, and you won't want to miss the next one. Dean adjusted his posture. He looked out at the audience briefly, not for help, not for approval. Then he looked back at Ali. The crowd waited. No one spoke. This was the moment where things could turn awkward, where egos could collide, where history could go wrong. Ali stood completely still, not smiling now, not frowning. Confident, certain. He had thrown the challenge not to embarrass Dean, but to reveal him. And here's the twist most people don't talk about. Ali already knew the answer. The real suspense wasn't whether Dean Martin could respond. It was how he would respond. With humor, with deflection, with authority, or with something no one expected. The audience held its breath, collectively, and somewhere in that silence it became clear. Whatever Dean said next wouldn't just define the moment. It would define how this night would be remembered forever. A quick question for you. Did you expect Muhammad Ali to turn serious here, or did this surprise you? Drop ALI in the comments if you felt that shift too. Because what came next is the reason people still talk about this moment today. Dean Martin didn't rush to speak. That alone said more than any joke ever could. He let the silence sit, not because he was unsure, but because he understood its weight. Silence, when used correctly, can be louder than applause. The audience waited. Some expected a punchline, others braced for deflection. Dean gave them neither. He looked at Muhammad Ali for a long moment, not challengingly, not defensively, just honestly. This wasn't a performer reacting to a bit gone wrong. This was a man responding to another man. Dean exhaled softly, almost a laugh, but not quite. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, comfortable in its own skin. No sharp edges, No raised volume. He didn't contradict Ali, he didn't dismiss him. Instead, Dean acknowledged the challenge without ever naming it. That was the first move. He said something simple, almost conversational, a line that sounded like humor, but carried something deeper underneath. The crowd laughed instinctively. But this time, the laughter felt different. It wasn't nervous, it wasn't relieved, it was respectful. Dean had taken control without seizing it. Ali watched closely. This was exactly what he had been waiting for. Dean continued, weaving humor and honesty together so seamlessly that most people didn't even realize what he was doing. He reframed the moment. Where Ali had created tension, Dean created balance. Where the room had narrowed, Dean widened it again. But he never once weakened his position. He spoke about stages, about timing, about knowing when to step forward and when to step aside. He didn't claim dominance. He didn't claim superiority. He claimed experience. And that was enough. Ali nodded just slightly. The audience noticed that too. It was subtle but powerful, a quiet acknowledgement from one legend to another. Dean glanced briefly toward the band, then back to Ali. A signal we're still in control. But we're doing this together. He added another line, softer this time. Less funny, more real. It wasn't directed at Ali alone. It was for everyone listening. A statement about confidence not needing proof, about presence not requiring permission. The laughter that followed wasn't explosive. It was warm, comfortable. The tension dissolved not because it was avoided, but because it had been handled correctly. Ali smiled again. This time it was genuine. The challenge had been met, not with force but with wisdom. Dean didn't stop there. He closed his response by giving something back to Ali. Not flattery, not praise, respect. He acknowledged Ali's courage, not just in the ring, but in moments like this, moments where uncertainty can't be dodged. The room responded instantly. Applause rose, not thunderous but deep. The kind of applause that recognizes something rare. Ali stepped forward slightly, as if to respond, then stopped himself. He didn't need to. Dean had already said everything. The cameras caught Ali's face, relaxed, satisfied, appreciative. This wasn't a win or a loss. It was a meeting. And that's what made it unforgettable. Most people watching at home would later say the same thing. They didn't remember the exact words. They remembered the feeling. Two icons standing under bright lights, choosing respect over ego. Dean Martin had read the moment perfectly. He hadn't escaped the challenge. He had accepted it and transformed it. As the show continued, the atmosphere never quite returned to what it was before. Something had shifted. Not in volume, not in energy, in meaning. People realized they had witnessed something unscripted, something real, and in an industry built on performance, that mattered. Ali knew it too. That's why he didn't push further. The test was complete, and both men had passed. For a brief moment after Dean Martin finished speaking, no one moved. The applause faded slowly, like it didn't want to end too quickly. People were still processing what they had just seen. This wasn't just banter. This wasn't just television. Something rare had happened in front of them, and everyone knew it. The cameras drifted across the audience. Some faces showed smiles. Others showed disbelief. A few people leaned toward one another, whispering, trying to decide whether that moment had been planned or completely spontaneous. Dean Martin stood relaxed, but alert. He had regained the room, yet he hadn't shut Muhammad Ali down. He had made space for him. Ali took it. He stepped forward again, slower this time. The movement alone pulled the room back into silence. Ali looked at Dean, not challengingly, not playfully, with respect. And then he laughed. Not a loud laugh, a short one. The kind that signals recognition. Ali responded with a line that flipped the energy once more, this time toward warmth. The audience laughed instantly, relieved and delighted. Dean joined in. Two legends, laughing on the same beat. The tension that had held the room now transformed into electricity. This was the moment people would replay. Ali added one more remark, lighter, but meaningful. A subtle acknowledgement that Dean had handled the challenge with grace. Dean nodded. That nod said everything. The crowd erupted, not because of a joke, but because of resolution. Applause filled the room again, louder than before. People stood. Not all of them, but enough to notice. Before the moment slipped away, Dean raised his hand slightly, signaling for calm. He wasn't finished. He looked out into the audience, then back at Ali. And then he delivered the line that sealed the night. A line so perfectly timed, so effortlessly delivered, that it landed like history being written in real time. The room exploded with laughter and applause. Ali's reaction was instant. He leaned back, eyes wide for just a second, impressed. Then he clapped hard. The cameras caught it. Muhammad Ali applauding Dean Martin. That image alone told the story. Before we go any further, if moments like this, unscripted, legendary, and real, are your thing, take a second to like the video and subscribe. These are the stories that remind us why icons matter. As the noise settled, Ali turned slightly toward the audience, not to boast, not to explain, but to include them. He said something short, a sentence that reframed the entire exchange as mutual respect, not rivalry. The crowd responded instantly. Cheers replaced laughter. This wasn't about who won. It was about what they witnessed. Dean stepped closer to Ali now, closing the physical gap completely. No tension left, only camaraderie. The band struck a few notes, unsure whether to move the show forward or let the moment breathe. Dean waved them off. He knew better. This moment needed space. He placed a hand lightly on Ali's shoulder, a rare gesture. The audience reacted again. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it was genuine. That's what made it powerful. At home, viewers leaned closer to their screens. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was connection. Ali looked around the room, smiling, absorbing the energy. Then he stepped back, surrendering the stage without losing presence. Dean resumed the show, but his voice carried something new now. A quiet pride. Because he hadn't just survived a challenge. He had elevated it. Quick question for you. Which moment stood out more? Ali's challenge or Dean's response? Comment, ALO, below. We read every comment. The audience slowly settled, but the feeling remained. People knew they would talk about this night later. And they were right. Because this wasn't just a clip. It was a reminder of how legends behave when tested, not with ego, not with force, but with respect. When the show moved on, the laughter returned. The music played. The night continued. But the moment didn't fade. People in the audience carried it with them, a feeling that something unscripted had slipped through the cracks of a carefully controlled world. Backstage, there was no confrontation, no raised voices, no ego-driven debrief. Just quiet acknowledgement. Those who were there would later say the same thing. Muhammad Ali and Dean Martin didn't need to talk about what happened. They both understood it. Because what had taken place wasn't about entertainment. It was about presence. In an industry built on performance, moments like this are rare. Television thrives on timing, cues, and predictability. This moment had none of that. Ali had stepped into a space that wasn't his, not to dominate it, but to test its strength. Dean had responded not by defending his ground, but by expanding it. That distinction mattered. Most public challenges collapse into one of two outcomes: escalation or embarrassment. This became neither. Instead, it turned into a masterclass in composure. Ali didn't challenge Dean Martin because he doubted him. He did it because he respected him. Ali believed that real confidence doesn't crack under pressure, it clarifies, and Dean proved that. He didn't need to overpower the moment. He didn't need to retreat from it. He met it. That's why people remembered his response more than the challenge itself. Not because it was louder, but because it was steadier. In the days that followed, people talked. Not in headlines or scandals, but in conversations. They talked about how natural it felt, how real it was, how rare it is to see two icons choose restraint over dominance. For Ali, this moment fit perfectly into a larger pattern. He had always tested boundaries not just in boxing rings, but in conversations, culture, and public spaces. Ali understood something most people don't. When you control yourself, you control the moment. For Dean Martin, the exchange reinforced something his fans already knew. Behind the humor was discipline. Behind the charm was awareness. He knew when to joke, and more importantly, he knew when not to. That night, millions of people saw that clearly. What made the moment endure wasn't a single line or gesture. It was the balance. Ali's courage, Dean's calm. Neither canceled the other out. They amplified each other. And that's why the clip continued to resurface years later, decades later. Not as a controversy, but as a lesson. A reminder that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles, sometimes it pauses, sometimes it listens. In a world that rewards loudness, this moment rewarded control. Viewers who watched it later often said the same thing. They didn't feel entertained. They felt respected. Because the exchange trusted the audience to understand nuance. It didn't spoon-feed meaning. It let silence do some of the work. That's why it aged so well. Even as styles changed, even as culture shifted, the core of the moment remained intact. Two men, one stage, no script, just awareness. And that awareness is why this moment didn't fade into trivia. It became legend, not because someone won, but because both men walked away unchanged and elevated. Long after the lights dimmed and the stage emptied, the moment stayed alive. Not in headlines, not in controversy. In memory. People who'd watched it live would later struggle to explain why it mattered, only that it did. They remembered how it felt more than what was said. That's usually the sign of something real. Muhammad Ali didn't walk onto that stage to dominate, and Dean Martin didn't respond to defend himself. They met each other exactly where they were, with confidence, restraint, and respect. That's the legacy of the moment. Ali showed that strength doesn't always need volume. That sometimes the boldest move is simply to stand your ground calmly and let the truth reveal itself. Dean showed something just as powerful. That wisdom isn't loud. That experience doesn't rush. That when you know who you are, you don't need to prove it. Together, they gave the audience something rare, a lesson without preaching. No one was humiliated. No one was overshadowed. And that's why the moment endured. In a world obsessed with winning, this moment wasn't about victory. It was about balance. Ali challenged not to embarrass, but to understand. Dean responded not to overpower, but to elevate. That exchange quietly reminded everyone watching of something we often forget. Real confidence doesn't fear being tested. It welcomes it. That's why people still share this clip decades later. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's human. Before we close, if stories like this, stories of legends, respect, and real moments mean something to you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. More powerful stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them. What makes this moment even more special is what didn't happen. There was no argument, no rivalry, no attempt to steal the spotlight. Just two men choosing composure over ego. That choice turned a simple TV appearance into a timeless lesson. Ali once said that confidence comes from knowing who you are, not from proving it to others. That night, both men lived that truth, and the audience felt it. That's why the applause wasn't just loud, it was sincere. That's why the silence mattered. That's why the memory lasted. As viewers, moments like this remind us why we're drawn to stories of greatness in the first place. Not for perfection, but for presence. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Which part of this story stood out most to you? Was it Ali's bold challenge, Dean's calm response, or the respect they showed each other? Tell us in the comments. Your feedback helps us make even better videos for you. More stories like this are on the way, stories of courage, character, and unforgettable moments that deserve to be remembered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.